Hi, welcome to 2015, and this is the new Ed Brown International Show. And we have a #1 guest here. I tell you, Michael Braxton. He's retired Foreign Service officer, and I think this was timely that what's happening in the world today, I mean, not yesterday, but today, about the Paris situation. And Michael's going to give us some input on what's happening as far as foreign service is concerned. I can learn something too. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. It's good to see you.
You know, look like we're playing this, but hey, look, this subject matter that we're going to start off with on a new 2015 Ed Brown show is incident in Paris that happened. Give us your background first so the people know that you didn't just come off the street. You have terrific background as far as foreign service is concerned.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Brown. I'm no expert, certainly, but I think first we need to send our condolences to the people of France for the tragedy that took place today, and our prayers, our thoughts and our prayers are with them. After that, I would say that of the many countries that these terrorists have singled out, they have taken on a handful with France because they have an excellent intelligence service. Their cooperation with their European partners is superb, and their cooperation with the United States is superb. So I'm fairly confident that we're going to, that these combined services and their efforts are going to result in the capture of the perpetrators. That said, I think the American people need some sort of explanation from your show as to what would motivate people to do what they did in Paris. The proximate cause, the near reason, is the provocation of the cartoons. That's a given.
You think the cartoons was?
That's one reason.
One reason. Okay.
The second reason is France has a huge population of people from Islamic countries. A few of whom may have been radicalized. I understand from the news reports that intelligence services are trying to find out which of them have been to Syria and Iraq and have returned and in the process become radicalized. And that sounds like a logical way to proceed.
You said radicalized. You're talking about maybe young people in the 30s or those over 50, or just how did they get into this type of situation?
Well, predominantly young people. In the sociology, the social pathology of radicalization is interesting and imprecise. But what we think we know is that in a country like the United States, the radicalization process does not come about as rapidly as it comes about in countries like France, partly because there's the assimilation process in the United States seems to be a little more effective. In France, we find that many of these people who in these communities, in these immigrant communities, live in the suburbs of the larger cities, and those suburbs are not as prosperous, shall we say, to put it delicately.
Economically.
Yes, as the city, the communities in the cities and the major city centers are. And we know that there's been a history of riots in the suburbs. Typically in France, that consists of rioting, burning of cars and tires. Now, since France is a country with perhaps the largest population of immigrants from Muslim countries, that's a sizable problem. So I think that's part of the explanation or answer to your question.
The word immigrant seems to have the connotation, even here in the United States. Basically, the whole country's immigrants. The only ones that are not immigrants here are the American Indians.
Well, that's true, and I suppose the short answer to that is you are an immigrant, but the other factor that determines the extent to which you are an immigrant is the extent to which you have assimilated or been allowed to assimilate.
But usually, we talk about immigrants, but there has to be a need. And right now, as far as the United States is concerned, immigrants are taking the low-paying jobs in order to get into our society. Okay, what's happening there in Paris? You're saying the immigrants are in the suburbs, whereas here, the immigrants generally are not in the suburbs, they're in the cities.
That's a really hard question. That really is a hard question.
Right.
What I think we're looking at is to step back and take a little more abstract look at French society to the extent that I understand it. Mm-hmm. These people have, for a variety of reasons, not been able to effectively enter the French job market with the same assurance, perhaps, as native-born French men and women. And these were the proximate causes of some of the riots. That was essentially the grievance. They need to have better access to more equitable access to housing, jobs, and therefore a livelihood that would sustain them in an advanced economy.
Well, but you're saying, generally in a society, the people that control the money are generally in areas closest to the businesses.
Well, I suppose you could say that as a generalization in most of the industrialized economies that we're talking about. What we're talking about is access, mm-hmm. and as we know from some of our problems with assimilation and access in the United States, we need to essentially deconflict access to equitable jobs, job equity, housing equity, access to education, and unless we move with some dispatch and determination to do that, then we're going to suffer similar problems as we did in the 60s.
Yes, that's going to happen because when you have in any society, and the United States is guilty of this, is 3% of the people control the wealth of the country. And what happens like in Paris, you find the individuals that are immigrants or not native, they're the ones that are suffering the same way that on the job market as those in the United States. But those in the United States are not immigrants.
Well, indeed, I think, and there's an implication to your question that I think is equally interesting. That implication is the mothers and fathers of immigrant children and minority children have the same aspirations for their children as the native-born parents do for their own children.
Exactly.
And when they find out that their children do not have equal access or equitable access to what they need in order to succeed in a highly complex and industrialized society, they do get angry.
Well, that's what I'm saying. In society where the have and the have-nots and the political system seems to support the haves, especially on certain legislation that they can see that's going to really hurt their society and the future of the children.
Well, exactly. And no one, native-born or immigrant, wants to raise their children and in an atmosphere of political and economic instability. But there's another issue here,
Okay.
and that is how the leader of how Muhammad, peace be upon him, is perceived by adherents to Islam, and is perceived by those who caricature him in the French and Danish press and Swedish press.
Hey, the press is the one that's really guilty, and they were the targets there in Paris because of the fact that apparently they're not telling the real story. What do you think about that?
Well, we're dealing with two different cultural norms here, political and cultural norms. One cultural norm says, thou must not criticize or belittle the leader of our religion. The other cultural norm says, we must have freedom of the press and the First Amendment, as we would refer to it in the United States, freedom of speech.
Yes.
So we have a clash of cultures. It would appear that one of the other tenets that I think people of an Islamic persuasion, of an extreme Islamic persuasion have that we might not be too aware of is that wherever they are must be considered their home, and their home must be made amenable and acceptable to Islamic tenets. One of those, there are several tenets that we're not very familiar with. One of them is Sharia law, extreme respect for. Another is extreme respect for Muhammad, peace be upon him. And these are non-negotiable.
Okay. Well, I think the reason for that possibly is people don't understand other religions. Generally, the press and others give an interpretation of a religion, and they feed it to the people. And what happens is the individuals, they don't go and actually check these things out. And just like most of the problems in the world are based on religion. Someone broke my religion belief. This is what I believe in.
Well, I think you have a point there, and my personal response to that would be that normally religions, we are children of history.
Right.
Normally, religions in the
Part of our
17th,
environment.
18th, and 19th, and certainly in the 20th century, gained respect through force of arms. And
say that real loud.
Yeah.
Force of arms.
So,
I think that's one of the problems.
So, I think that Islam has gained more understanding in the last 25 to 30 years than it had before. It had it gained the assets of its oil wealth and therefore more respect throughout the world,
right.
economic clout.
Right. But generally, people, like I say, the press, they feed, and as a foreign service or the officer, former. Well, you see where the people are being fed the wrong information about these religions and what is being done, and this is done by the press. And see, and the press get involved in doing this, then they create a different image than really, like you were telling me, what it really is and what the problem is.
You can't lose when you respect another man's religion, and I think that should
That's the problem.
That should be a premise in our media.
Well, what has happened is that I think the media has painted one religion as better than the other, or we have the best religion, they don't have it. You know, they've made made it so that individual associate certain things to certain religions.
Well, I think we have to be
and
careful.
they emphasize those things too.
Well, I think we have to be very, very careful here, because when we're talking about Islam, we need to differentiate we have to differentiate the elements that separate the adherents to people who adhere to Islam. What we're also looking at is a war of extremists among moderates within the Islamic faith. And there are moderates who are as reasonable as you, or hopefully I, who don't hold to the same beliefs and tenets that these people do who attacked the journalists in Paris. They would be victims as well if these people had an opportunity to attack them. So it is important to understand the tenets of Islam. Yes, you're right, but it is also important to understand those who are susceptible to reason within that faith and those who reject reason.
Well, actually, you know for yourself, indoctrination is a terrific tool. And what happens with that, the indoctrination of the young people, too, is so very important. And it seems that these different groups, they appeal to the young people no matter what religion they're in.
That's right. And as I understand it, there are reports out of the UK, out of Britain, where they're making some inroads and countering that kind of indoctrination. I understand that in Saudi Arabia, some steps have been taken to how would you say, deprogram people who have been indoctrinated in that way.
Right.
And these are important initiatives, because we need to address the issue on an individual basis as well as on a collective basis. The collective basis, when we talk about what the proximate causes are for this extreme disenchantment in France among the immigrant communities, and on an individual basis, as is happening in England and Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, but you find it's not just Islams that are involved in this indoctrination. You find Americans, young Americans, you have others that are actually attracted to the teaching, and the teaching seems to be that they've reached a point where they have radicalized the information that the press associate themselves with violence.
Well, yeah, that's true. And we need to understand also that certain troubled people are highly susceptible to this kind of indoctrination. Right. Before we even had this problem, we had gangs in America made up of people who were susceptible to this kind of indoctrination. And we know that prisons in America are hotbeds for this kind of indoctrination.
Certainly. Well, in America, the Ku Klux Klan, you know, the way they function, you know, the interpretation that, you know, that people have of that's an organization that some people feel is still functioning, and I mean, not openly, but it is functioning through other means. What do you think of that?
Well, clearly, I mean, the Southern Poverty Law Center has established the Klan as an enduring element of or perpetrator of terror in the United States, and I think it has been identified as a danger to the fabric of American society. What we have to understand also is citizens of any given country have certain expectations that arise from the social contract, and one of those expectations is that the citizenry will be protected against terror, and governments struggle to make this happen successfully. In the case of France, we saw that there was a breakdown, and that's why it is huge news all around the world. But good governments will redouble their efforts to protect their citizens.
Eradicate that.
That's right. To prevent another outrage, and the fact that the Klan, the Ku Ku Klux Klan is on not only the Southern Poverty Law Center's list, but also on the FBI terrorist list, is a good sign that this country understands its responsibilities vis-a-vis its citizenry.
Well, what do you suggest could bring the you've been around the world, a couple places, that would bring the religions to the point that they can compromise? That's a hard one.
That's a very hard question, because what we're talking about here is a belief system, and belief systems are not readily susceptible to logic and argumentation. What we need to do, it seems to me, is to create, and I don't know how one would go about doing this, but is to create
generations
an environment that would broaden would broaden the numbers, would increase the numbers of those who are more susceptible to reason in these religions that have elements that are prone to violence, so that their viewpoints would be drowned out by those who are enjoying the fruits of a reasonably based economy that has access for all and is susceptible to change.
I think you got a point there. Yeah, access for all, and the fact that I think that the economy is one thing that would bring people closer together. If in fact they felt that they had an opportunity to survive in an environment, where they would be based, it would be based on their ability and not their religion. Because sometimes people use religion as a barometer to hire people.
I think that is a very important distinction that you're making. We stand or fall on our recognition as individuals who are owed the full benefits of citizenship, not benefits that are based on our religion, our ethnicity, our class.
Yes, class. That's one. And economics. I think that divides people more than anything else. This separation, and some countries and some groups that they use economics as a barometer. Or whether we're going to accept you or not.
Well, indeed, in societies that are characterized by ancient traditions of heraldry, that is a default that has been respected in the past, and it has encumbered them from offering full access to the promise that the society holds for all of its citizens.
Well, what happens, and I've said this many times, education is so very important. And I think some of the rulers, the kings and the queens and all of that, they use it by denying free education to their people. And I always feel that education is an investment in your country, and that if we would, look at it where it's economically feasible, now most education is out of sight.
I think it's interesting that you say that, because in the United States we have an excellent example. Those in the days of slavery, the slaveholders had a very firm idea of how to maintain that institution. One was to prevent reading, writing, any education, any use of the native language, and practice of the native religion. Now, we recognize these 5 principles as freedoms today.
Yes.
But they recognized them in the days of the institution of slavery as principles that would perpetuate slavery. I think that's the answer to your question.
Okay. Well, the economy, as far as people being in that position, most of us think you slave in terms of just ownership, but the same thing happened in the corporate world, in the business world, is that individuals become slaves of the corporation. What do you think about that?
That happens,
Mhm.
and it happens because I suppose there really is a distinction between wealth and prosperity. While the people who are the owners of wealth in any given society will accept the middle class becoming prosperous.
Mhm.
Some in that class, in that upper wealthy class, would probably draw the line at those who are prosperous becoming truly wealthy. And this is this is my personal opinion, but I think this argument and this viewpoint can be defended.
Well, in other countries in Africa and Asia and even Europe, your wealth sometimes is something that you didn't earn, is something that's passed on from generation because your name is Michael Braxton.
Inherited wealth, indeed.
Inherited wealth.
Right,
Right.
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 And it's not just inherited wealth. It's those families that were legacy families for, say, the Ivy League schools or similar schools in wealthy countries in Western Europe. These are advantages that are closed to immigrants, many immigrants and minorities, and the consequences of that reality will have to be faced before we can say that we are creating societies that we are creating totally societies that guarantee total access and equity to all of its citizens.
Well, how do you talk? How do you stop revenge, vendettas? You go from one country to like the situation in Paris, and that was thought about the cartoons that were in the United States here. How do you bridge that gap?
It's extremely difficult, and as I said earlier, what we think we're looking at in the efforts in the United Kingdom and Saudi Arabia and other countries to deprogram young people, those might be the ways, those might be effective tools. They don't necessarily guarantee success, but what they do is to establish a different basis on which to judge actions that the individual finds grossly offensive, so offensive that they must resort to violence.
Well, when it reaches that point, where the control, like some of the nations in the world, we live in one of the better nations, they are deprived of basic things, in, I say, South America, Africa, and even parts of Europe. There's such a situation, economic problems.
Yeah, that's right. We have to understand that the goals that we seek for our societies are different from the goals that the extremists seek for their own.
Right, it's true. Well, hey, it's nice to have we coming back. So because a lot of things in the world that are happening here that people think shouldn't happen, and Ed Brown's going to bring. This is the international. This is the 2015. See you next time.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.